Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live learning event on the improvements in reviewing document data in Grooper. This is the third event in our Dev Notes series, which is designed to give you insights on the newest Grooper innovations. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brad Blood, and I will be the moderator for today's event. If you have any questions, as always, you can just send them in through the little Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer those questions, all of your questions, as time allows. We're also going to be recording this meeting today, and we will be sending out a link to the recording to everyone who registered for it today. And we will also add this video to the Grooper YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe to Grooper AI on YouTube to never miss a thing and see a lot of other videos or just old videos that we have that maybe you've been looking for. All right. Today's speaker is Dylan Greenwood, Director of Product Operations here at Grooper. Dylan is dedicated to educating Grooper users on the possibilities of intelligent document capture. With a background as an educator, Dylan's aim is to increase understanding of the Grooper platform, leading to effective and efficient document processing solutions. His work includes a lot of stuff, which includes designing Grooper University coursework and robust documentation on the Grooper Wiki. Dylan, take it away.
Thanks, Brad. So welcome, everybody, again. Thanks for joining us this morning. And like Brad said, we're going to be talking about various improvements to basically the Grooper data review experience. You know, some of these are kind of small quality of life improvements that have just kind of built up over, the past few development cycles that you may or may not be aware of. Some of them are changes to the UI that, you might want to be aware of to just get yourself used to the new look and feel of things. But there's also some configuration that's been added as well to, better help validate documents during a review or just, make, quite frankly, your users' experience a little easier as they're reviewing documents. And then at the kind of tail end of this webinar, we're going to get into something called spatial grounding. If you've been with us for the past few webinars, you have probably heard me mention spatial grounding. It's a really interesting way of using an LLM to basically get better highlighting on a document, but we'll save that towards the end. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into Grooper and show you a couple examples of the new stuff that we have included. And I'm going to be kind of jumping back and forth between the review client and also some of these assets in Grooper when needed to show you how to configure some of this stuff. But for the most part, we're just going to be showing you basically some new stuff in review. All right, let me go find the batch I'm looking for, and we'll go ahead and open this up. So first thing first, if you are on an older version of Grooper, even an older version of 25, we've made some changes to the data grid itself. So this panel right here is what I'm talking about when I say data grid. It is, where all the document data is in a data viewer. So first thing first, you may notice that we've changed up sort of how this top bar looks. It used to look like just this kind of a patterned background, sort of like this, with the document type name. And now you'll notice we've got this kind of tab here. We'll talk a little bit more about why this looks like a tab briefly, but for the first thing I want to mention is that this bar right here, this kind of top level navigation bar, now stays pinned. So if you have longer data models that you're reviewing and you notice I kind of scroll down and down and down, you'll notice two things actually. One, this bar itself stays pinned and kind of stays put as you travel down the data grid, but also the validation messages stay pinned as well. So that's good for a number of reasons. Number one, these validation messages stay put, which can be useful for your reviewers. Number two, access to certain commands is a lot easier as well. So if you right-click the document type, this tab right here, this is all of the kind of document level commands. So if you're kind of scrolling through review and you need to get to these document level commands, you don't have to scroll back up. It stays put right here. You can edit type assignment, flag the item, rerun extract, all that good stuff from the document level. As well, if you right-click in this blank space, that's going to access data level commands, data model level commands as well. So if you're kind of, again, knee deep into review here and you need to say, run a fill method that is set on the data model level. You don't have to go back up or kind of find the right place to click in this data grid. You can always just click right up here, and that will give you data model level commands. Also, let's go ahead and talk about this list of validation errors. So it behaves much the same. If we click on one of these validation errors, it'll take us straight to the field in error. We've also included a capability of expanding this with a slider. So if you've got a bunch of errors or you just want to kind of get this out of your way a little bit, you now have that capability in Grooper with that slider. You can also hide it entirely just by clicking on the number of validation errors. So if you need to totally get it out of your way, that's very, very easy to do. Everybody still with me? Any questions so far?
Nope, none so far.
We've also added some kind of user customization, just kind of changes how this grid appears a little bit with this hamburger menu as well. So you'll notice now that we have the ability to choose where this error list appears. It used to always appear at the top of the data grid. You couldn't do anything about where it goes. You can now pin it to the left, which will give you kind of a nice list right here, but the data grid on the right, you can pin it to the right as well. You can pin it below with these cardinal directions. You also have the show document structure. The feature has moved to this hamburger dropdown as well. So if your users like to turn that on to show, basically all the grouper highlighting for where everything on the document is extracted, this is where that feature lives now. It's toggleable just with a check mark. This use error tooltips check mark has been included as well for users who have the whole data grid minimized. If that is, why aren't you showing up here? Because I turned it off. That's why. If you have it off, these error tooltips on the field will not show up. If you have it on, they will show up right next to the field. That's basically just an option for users who, need to kind of get that out of the way. If it's obscuring the rest of the UI in one way, shape, or form, that is the whole reason why we have that. Now, all of this capability is basically just there to show and hide validation errors to the user, get it out of the way if they need to, pop it up if they need to, kind of change where it is laid out if they need to, all with the goal in mind of just making it easier to review these errors. Looks like we might have a question.
Yes. Someone said they just joined the meeting, so sorry if this was talked about. If the data sections /grid can be collapsible.
No, we have not added that feature yet. That has popped up a couple of times, kind of like a button or something that would just kind of minimize these data sections to kind of get them out of your way momentarily. We have not added that feature yet. No. That's a good question, though. I'll mention that to Dev that came up in this meeting. Okay, what's next? So we talked about this panel. Oh, we also have this search fields functionality. And this has been in the product for a little bit, but you may or may not be aware of it. The idea behind this search box here is it would allow users to basically search the extracted text of any field. So, this is actually a pretty good example of how you might use this functionality. I've got an error message here that's telling me, hey, we've got some kind of calculation error and there's a difference of this number. Well, I don't know where exactly this is going on, but maybe I'll search for just this number, 4275, and see if I can't find, the problem. Hit enter, and what Grooper is going to do, a couple of things you may have noticed. Number one, it is going to outline the resulting inputs in orange. Doesn't matter if it is a table cell or actually like a field value up here. If it matches what you type here, it's going to outline it in orange. It's also going to give you basically a list of hits right here. And, you have a navigator to even navigate to them if they aren't sort of right next to them, like my example here. But to me, a reviewer kind of looking at this indicates to me, oh, yeah, well, Grooper probably didn't extract this row super well. It's actually a little bit superfluous and should have been combined with this row above. I would delete it, kind of make the adjustments I need to, yada, 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 and resolve the issue, as a reviewer. That about covers it for the major changes to the data grid. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything before I move on, but I think we're good to go to the next new feature. Any questions before I do? Doesn't look like it. Okay.
Nope, none currently. Nope.
All right. So that's kind of basically going to affect anybody doing data review in terms of how this grid appears. Next up, we have a couple of new features that I want to discuss. Kind of just changes how validation works in Grooper and gives you, the designers, a little bit more control over, what users can and cannot do. So we have always had in Grooper the ability to confirm fields in error. And sometimes that's, very, very important just to get stuff moving along in data review. So you'll notice here I've got a couple of errors. One, I've got this required field email, right? And, it's barking at me because Grooper didn't extract anything. Okay, well, looking at this document, there is no email. There is no email for this vendor. It's just not on the page, right? So, this would be an area or a situation where a reviewer might say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and confirm that. I know we normally require that field, but I've double checked. This value just doesn't exist on this document. So I'm going to go ahead and hit confirm, right click the field, hit confirm so that I can confirm that field and move on with my life. That being said, though, there are certain types of fields where you really don't want a user to do that, especially, let's be honest, a lazy user. This field right here is telling you there's an actual calculation error, and probably the issue here is there's some kind of, OCR issue or something that, caused Grooper to just not extract the value correctly. And yeah, that's absolutely the case here. It extracted 1342.30 when it should have extracted something different, 1342.32, right? It is then the user's job to go in there and, update that by actually entering in the correct data, right? You don't want them to just go ahead and confirm this value. That's a long way of saying we've got a new feature here called disallow confirm. You'll notice I can't confirm this field. That is because if I go back to review here, go back to the data model here, I have configured a feature that doesn't let a reviewer do that. When you have this disallow confirm property set to true, that confirm button won't be available to the user. So you use this when you have fields that, really need to be validated and you don't want a user to accidentally confirm it or just, confirm everything without actually double checking and making sure that the correct value is entered. Okay. I am super wordy, so I'm going to probably try and be a little faster for these next couple. Let's see here. Custom values is something that has been in Grooper for a long time. So we have our value types like string, decimal, int, yada, 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 right? There is also a value type called custom. And, it basically allows you to set a regular expression pattern that will help validate the field. That's been in Grooper for a while. This has a custom value set up with a regular expression pattern to validate social security numbers. Obviously, we got a problem here because we only should have 2 digits in the middle, right? The new thing that we have is there is a new property called hint that allows you to basically type some custom information, allowing you to tell your users, hey, something's going on here. This doesn't match this custom value pattern. Here's why. So this text here that you see, invalid custom value, a social security number must be 9 digits, yada, 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 yada. That is showing up in the review client because I have set my custom value type here with my parse pattern here and entered in a hint here. This is how that validation text is showing up in review for your users. Okay. Moving on to the next new feature. I'll get back into my review client and my next document. Here we go. We have our trusty, rusty application for cow license that you may have seen on some of our Grooper University material. We've got a feature that has been asked for multiple times in the past, just for a quality of life for multi-select fields. So obviously here we've got a type of cow applied for field. This can only be one value, right? You're either applying for one of these types of cows, right? In this case, domestic is the right one. Other checkbox fields like type of application have multiple checkboxes that can be selected, right? So here we can select new, we can select multi-cow. The feature we have added, if you have the data field configured up to allow it to accept multiple inputs, we can now just tick a checkbox for each checked box. That will enter each selection as an array and separated by a separator. To get that to work, don't have to do too much in terms of field configuration here. It's basically a two-step process. One, you enter in your list values, just as kind of you normally do. In this case, all of those check boxes for these application types. And then two, all you got to do is make this value type a type of an array by just entering a value delimiter. Here I did a pipe. You can do whatever you want. It can be comma, it can be semicolon, whatever separator you choose for value delimiter. Once you enter that, that is how you get these check boxes to show up. Any questions so far?
Nope, everything looks really good.
Perfect. A couple of more new things. Go back into review so I can show these off for you. One is definitely just a straight up quality of life improvement, and it has to do with long running operations that happen in the background, like lookups can. Some lookups are super, super fast. So I've got a really dumb lookup here where I am just looking up the name of the superhero and it's doing a real quick SQL search to fill in the rest of these fields. That's not always the case. Sometimes lookups, if they're, using web services or if they've just got like a really complex chain of events happening behind the scenes, they can take a little bit longer. So here I've basically configured the same lookup to just run slowly. And you'll see we now have a little visual indicator that just tells you, hey, something is happening in the background. This should help users who have been confused in the past when, say, a longer running lookup is happening in the background, or even just some complex data rule or validation logic is happening in the background. If now they will see that working wheel show up to indicate, hey, something's going on, you might want to hold off on data entry until it's over. No configuration necessary. That is just how Grooper works now. And last but not least, I'm going to go to this next document and you will probably see some new stuff. Just if you're a little eagle-eyed here, notice we've got a lot of buttons that don't normally show up. So this one right here is running a fill method. This one right here is inserting a record to a multi-instance section. This one right here is deleting a record for a multi-instance section. We've also got some buttons next to these rows and tables. These are essentially just right-click context menu commands that are now exposed as quick and easy to find buttons in review. So for stuff that is very, very commonly used, like say inserting a new row, users don't have to go hunt and search for these commands in a right-click context menu. You, the designer, have the capability of adding these buttons so that they are easily found in the review client. These are configured per, type of, blanking on the word here, data element container. So you can do this for data models. You can do this for data sections, and you can do this for data tables. You'll see that each of these different types of elements has a command button types editor under appearance. If you bring that up, it's going to give you all the different types of commands that you can normally access with a right click and allow you to check them off to include as buttons in the UI. And you'll also note for, at least for data tables, you've got a bunch for table row instances as well. These will show up. Actually, it's just going to be easier to show you on this one because actually, no, I'm going to have to go back and review. No, we'll cheat here. Just give an initial row count so we can actually see a row here. These will show up at the end of each row. So here I have delete row instance, and I've got insert row and move up and move down. So you'll see we've got those added as buttons to the end of each row instance. So anyway, this is going to be a new way to customize the review experience for your users. Just basically give them handy shortcuts for really, really commonly used commands. Furthermore, if you guys have custom commands that are executed during review, those can show up as well. They'll show up in this list of command button types. And as long as you've got a icon for those commands, these buttons will show up just like our, built-in Grooper commands. One more thing before we move on to spatial grounding. I need to get back into my review client here. You may have noticed there was another button in my multi-instance data section here. So you got this weird kind of no table looking button. Notice you don't see that anywhere else. You don't see it in single instance data sections. You don't see it in the data model. You will only ever see this in multi-instance data sections. Enabling this feature by clicking on it is going to change dramatically how the data grid appears. So notice, we don't have the kind of normal data grid, and we got this whole table thing. What has happened is for each one of these 16 sections, it is just presenting their values as a table. So this makes it really, really easy to review these single instance fields. Now notice we're not getting any kind of table level detail, but we are getting single instance fields for every single section. As I tab through here, you'll see this number changes. So now I'm reviewing the 6th section instance here. If I select here, that's the 10th section instance. And, this makes it really, really easy to just review kind of at a glance particular single instance fields. Also, if you've got, say, a scenario where, hey, maybe this group name got extracted wrong for every single one of these instances. So now that you can see this very clearly, let's say it was supposed to be OXR instead of QXR. Now that you can see this very clearly in this kind of adjusted view, you can use our set all command, which is itself a little bit newer, to set the field value for this collection of section instances. So yeah, let's say it was OXR instead of QXR, right? If I hit apply here, it's going to change that for every single section instance. This is a toggle too, so you can always go back to the other view if this is easier for you to review, kind of section instance by section instance, or, of course, you'll need to be in this view to review extracted table data. Okay, any questions before I go on?
No, none currently, but just a reminder to everyone, you can submit any questions you have through our Q&A box at the bottom, or later on, if you have questions that that you just come up with after our meeting, you can email anybody here at Grooper. You can always send an email to the email address info@grooper.com, and we will pass it on to the right person.
Excellent. Thank you, Brad. One more thing before we get into spatial grounding. I do need to mention this for anybody who is using secondary types. This isn't the most common thing, but your experience is going to be dramatically different if you do use secondary types. So, in this scenario, I've got some EOB documents, and one of the things you can do with secondary types is basically do a primary classification and a secondary classification. So my primary classification for this document is Robata because it is a EOB from this made-up vendor or provider Robata, but it's also a check, right? It's got this check here, whereas this document does not. So this process is set up to basically assign a secondary type, in this case, for a check, noting that, hey, we've got some data we want to collect from this check itself, right? If you have this kind of scenario where you've got multiple document types assigned to a particular document, you will see the review experience change a little bit. This document just has one type. We've already seen that. This document is one that has two. Previously in Grooper, these were kind of appended to the bottom of the data grid, made it really hard to kind of go back and forth between types. So if you wanted to go between the Robata data grid and then this check data grid, you'd have to kind of do a bunch of scrolling action. Now, this is why we've got these tabs up at the top. You can easily go back and forth between multiple types in this new UI redesign. Okay, last but not least, and I know I'm running short on time, so I will try and explain this as quickly and as efficiently as I can. Last but not least, we have spatial grounding. The whole idea behind spatial grounding is something that we at BIS and even me personally have come to understand about AI. In a lot of different ways, AI is very good at solving problems one at a time. If you give an AI a fairly narrow scope, it tends to do a very good job. When AI starts to break down is where you try and have it do too many things at once. So we have seen that AI is very, very good at extracting data using artificial intelligence, and that's where AI extract came from, right? And it does, generically speaking, a pretty good job. You don't have to give a whole lot of instructions. You don't have to do a whole lot of work to get some pretty good data. So I've got Basically, I just asked an AI to make me a data model, telling me some information that might be important for an oil and gas lease. And if I look at the text content of what it came for these, key elements of a granting clause, it's actually pretty good. It's very accurate, but you'll notice the highlighting is garbage, right? AI did a very good job of answering the question, finding the data, but, we've still got to line that back to a document. And, having an AI do both things doesn't always work out. Here, I tried to do that with this data model here, basically tell the AI, hey, I'm going to have you do two things at once. I'm going to have you, extract the data from the document intelligence data that I collected previously, but then I'm also going to have you align that data back at the same time. That's why we've got these geometric alignment options configured here. When I did that, notice that the data extracted is very different. And in a lot of ways, and I'm not going to get into the details too much, it's not as good from an accuracy perspective as well. So there's more text here. There's less text here. That's clear as day. But the accuracy of these values is also a little bit off too. That being said, though, the highlighting is gangbusters. This is telling you very, very clearly exactly from where the document AI collected this data. So again, we asked the AI to do two things at once. One, extract data. Two, marry that back to the document so that we can highlight. When you do that, one of the two things is going to suffer. Either the data collected is going to be not as good, as is mostly the case here, or two, the highlighting isn't going to be as good. That is the entire reason why we created a new fill method called spatial grounding. And the whole idea about spatial grounding is to, basically do two AI passes to better resolve these two problems. So now you'll see that I have two fill methods configured on this data model. One, AI extract, configured to just extract the data. I've even changed the configuration a little bit here, supplying only the markdown version of DI layout. And then as far as the alignment goes, I'm not even having to worry about it. I'm changed everything here to none so that the AI can truly focus on just extracting the data. Then I've added a spatial grounding fill method whose entire job is just to highlight the data. So it sends the extracted values that were collected from AI extract to an LLM and just asks it, hey, now that you know what these values are, where do you think they came from on the document? And I am using the DI layout quote method, using that HTML format that kind of massages or reformats the document text as if it were an HTML document, giving it better boundary locations. And, basically that's it. I didn't do anything else here. Just that 1-2 punch of AI extract followed by spatial grounding does a really good job of getting those much more accurate values, but also highlighting something on the document that was used to support that extracted value. So here, one of the things I really like about this is, if you will notice, somewhere in here, it says yada, 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 there's a bunch of minerals covered, but, hey, we've also got this reference in the addendum to other minerals that was deleted. That's really important information to somebody who is analyzing an oil and gas lease. And what is highlighted? Boom, that exact section in the addendum that is important to this extracted value. And that's basically the idea. Again, two-step process, two fill methods, two passes to an AI. AI extract does the job of finding the data or extracting the data. Spatial grounding does the job of highlighting it for a better review experience. All right, guys, I think that about covers it, and I'm a little over on time. So I appreciate you sticking around, but I do want to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. If you have questions about spatial grounding, or you have questions about any of the review changes and improvements that we've made, please do so now.
Yep. If you have any more questions, go ahead and send those in the last few minutes of our meeting today. But, for now, Dylan, thanks. Those were some great insights. And everyone, thank you for joining us today. We hope this is giving you a good introduction to these improvements and just new AI solutions in Grooper. And one reminder, we will be sending out a link to everybody so you can rewatch this recording or send it to a coworker or friend. And we'll also be adding this to the Grooper YouTube channel tomorrow or Friday. And if you're ready to explore how Grooper can help you more or your organization even more, please reach out to myself, Dylan, or anyone else on the Grooper team. But for now, thanks everybody. Have a great day.